Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We will call this hearing to order. Thank you for joining us for the second hearing on the proposed creation of a city rental registry. I would like to thank my colleagues who have joined me, as well as our Department of Development and Building and Zoning for work they've put in since the last hearing. On September 16th, I held an initial hearing to discuss the proposed creation of a rental registry for the city. Since that hearing, our office has received dozens of emails, letters, and phone calls from residents, organizations, and property owners expressing their comments and thoughts. We've also done some, I think, intentional engagement with folks directly as well. Based on that feedback, our Department of Development and Department of Building and Zoning made several changes to the framework of the proposed registry. Tonight, they will present that updated framework followed by public testimony. But before jumping into the presentations of the changes, I would like to just remind everyone that we are still in the stakeholder engagement phase of this process and welcome continued feedback as well as we continue, to tweak the framework of the registry. And so I just want to clear up some things. There is no legislation. There is no predetermined outcome. We are really engaging with folks. And so I look at this room tonight and I'm thankful because this is part of the process, us having a discussion of how we get to a solution that works for Columbus. And so I want to thank everyone for being here today. Again, we currently do not have any draft legislation prepared, nor do we have a full proposed budget for the registry just yet. So again, we are still in that stakeholder and discussion phase. Before we move on to our directors, again, I want to acknowledge my colleague, Councilmember Otto Beatty, and see if there's any opening comments that you would like to offer, Councilmember.
No, thank you.
Those are the briefest opening remarks of any council member ever in the city's history, so I appreciate you. So now I would like to pass the mic to Director Scott Messer with our Department of Building and Zoning, and also Deputy Director Hannah Jones with our Department of Development for the presentations. Directors, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Council Member. Before I start, I just also want to introduce a couple other members of our team that are here. Ryan Kelsey from Building and Zoning Services and Graham Bowman from Development is here as well. As a team, as questions arise, we're all here to try to answer them the best we can. But I do have a few slides to go through. I'll try to make it as quickly as possible to work through these slides and then be happy to answer any questions. So first of all, the first slide talks about our goals in this program is to establish an annual registration process for all residential rental properties. There are exceptions, as we've talked about in previous conversations, for folks who are on other license programs or registries, so vacant property, hotel, motel, short-term rentals, those are all covered under other license and registration programs. It'll help to provide the city with critical information related to the number, ownership, management, and condition of rental units, and integration of a more proactive inspection process that we'll talk about in a minute that helps to respond to critical issues with some of our more troubling and problem properties. Stakeholder feedback. We want to just summarize a little bit of what we've heard so far. We've heard that there needs to be a focus on our problem properties and our bad actors without unnecessarily burdening a majority of the owners who are responsible property owners. The tier system that we originally introduced seemed overly complicated to folks. The fees were high. Combined with a self-inspection requirement to bring in outside inspectors would raise costs. The local operator requirement would be difficult for some small out-of-town owners to comply with. The details that we had around self-attestation, the ability for folks to self-inspect were critical to people, and proactive inspections are necessary for tenants who fear retaliation at properties with a history of code violations. That was all feedback that we heard from our original proposal. So what I'd like to do is just go over some of the summary of our revisions that we've made based on those. We created what we now call conditional registration. this is how we were responding to the idea of focusing on our more problem landlords. And so what you'll see is that conditional registration is triggered by a rolling 12-month period looking at code enforcement, housing, zoning, or health orders. For 100 units or less, 5 orders would trigger, and for over 100 units, 10 orders would trigger a conditional registration evaluation. Also, any unresolved emergency vacate orders, failure to disclose accurate information, or being the subject of a criminal referral to city attorney for retaliatory action may all put you in that conditional status. I just highlight down there, there's an asterisk. When we talk about code enforcement orders, I just want to highlight that that is not numbers of violations. Oftentimes, our code officers would go out, we will find violations, give people a chance to correct those violations. At some point, if the violations aren't corrected, a code enforcement order may be issued, and it might list as 5, 10, 4, however many violations there are would be included in that code enforcement order. So I want to be clear that it's not 5 technical violations, it's 5 separate incidents, 5 separate times that you've been issued an order from our code enforcement office or building, housing, or health. Next, you have more information about the conditional registration. It reverts back to a regular registration once an owner has complied with all outstanding orders. The director will determine that the owner has complied with the terms of any remediation plan or outstanding issues that need to be addressed. And then the property could be removed from the registry and subject to civil penalties if they fail to comply with outstanding orders within 180 days or substantially fails to comply with the terms of any written remediation plan. So here's the change we made under fees. We were at $40 per unit with a $5,000 maximum, and the new proposal has been revised down to $20 per unit with a total of $3,000 as the maximum. So anyone with 150 units or more would max out at the $3,000 figure and would no longer owe the $20 per unit for anything above the maximum fee. The conditional registration that I just talked about for our more troubling properties, and by the way, our estimates right now are that based on 2025 and 2024 numbers, that we're talking about approximately 1% of our properties that would be subject to the 5 and 10 code enforcement orders or other orders that would put them into a conditional registration status. So I want that to be a point that everyone hears, which is, when we said we're going to focus on our problem properties, we estimate that to be literally maybe 1% of our property owners. 99% of our property owners would pay the regular $20 per unit and register and move on and could attest to the condition of their property. It's that 1% of folks that are subject to the conditional registration that would have to pay an additional $250 fee and an additional $20 per unit to compensate for inspections and follow-up and plans that we would be initiating to follow up on those more troubling properties. At the bottom there, you'll see the fees that we're collecting. Those fees are required to be used in support of the initiative. So those fees would go to software, administrative staff, implementation costs, code officer time, conditional registration inspections, enforcement, additional remediation, and discretionary mitigation programs that may be associated with this registration. So the fees are not going into the general fund. The fees are not going to be used outside of the program. The fees will come into building and zoning services and be used for costs and expenses related to the program. Also, some of the changes that we made around inspections, as I said, folks who are not on conditional registration, they will be able to self-attest to the condition of their property and will not have to engage any outside independent inspectors. If they do use a property maintenance company, for example, who already does inspections, we will get the results of those inspections, and also have forms and a process which are still being developed, but we'll have forms and a process where everyone else who is not conditional can self-attest to the condition of their property. The conditional registration, as I mentioned before, is what would kick in the possibility of third-party inspections. It would also allow us to get into 10% of the units and evaluate all the critical systems for the property. The remediation plan that I talked about for conditional registration, that is on a limited case-by-case basis. It might include agreed-upon details and a timeline for abatement, schedule of proactive city or third-party inspectors. Relocation assistance might be necessary if occupants have to be vacated, and there may be some other conditions that we apply for that remediation plan. Again, conditional registration and remediation plans, we believe, will apply to about 1% of our properties in Columbus. Local operator. This is the part where we want to collect information on ownership. All properties must have a local operator within 100 miles and must identify a natural person related to the owner. So that's a little different. We had some contiguous county language in the first draft, changed that to a more standard 100-mile radius, just because county lines and other boundaries may change, but the 100 miles is a more definitive geographic location. We clarified that any Ohio real estate license holder may be the local operator, regardless of where they reside. That has to do with just being licensed in all of the state of Ohio, so they do not have to be within the 100 miles. And owners of less than 10 total units don't necessarily need to have a local operator, but still need to identify an emergency contact for us. That was in response to the idea that some of our smaller property owners don't necessarily have a whole group of folks managing the property. It might just be themselves. Next, we talk about, again, there was a proposal originally that dealt with our tiers and which properties must submit a property condition report if they're trying to sell the property. We've changed that to really just clarify that anything that's happening under our registration program does not get delayed or changed by selling of your property. So if you happen to be one of those 1%ers that's on a remediation plan, you can't just sell your property and start all over. The new owner essentially inherits that plan and those conditions and must still comply with getting the property up to speed before we are going to allow them to have a new registration that is not conditional. And really, it does happen more than you think. Right now, when we have to deal with just code orders, a lot of times property owners are able to just transfer property to a different LLC or do something around the ownership that makes us start the whole legal process all over again, writing all new orders and all fresh court cases. And properties can languish in our court system for years based on those types of actions by some of our property owners who are trying to avoid accountability. This allows us another tool to try to deal with that so that their registration can be held up until the new ownership complies with whatever conditions we have on the property. You'll see here under the enforcement slide, we're saying that you can lose your registration, that failure to register may have administrative fines and late fees. A failure to register can also implicate civil penalties. So if you're willfully refusing to register your property, you can be subject to a civil penalty, which is essentially $2 per day per unit every single day that you remain in non-compliance, with a minimum of $10 per day. The criminal charges and public nuisance that you see here, those are currently in our statute, but we are looking at really a focus on the civil side of things. We're not looking to have this be a criminal violation and the public nuisance designations. We do have code language that we'll have to change and tweak to make sure that it's clear that for the registry, we're looking at civil penalties and fines, not criminal charges. But properties who, a lot of our properties who are, some of our more problem properties are already in the criminal process. So we're not saying that some of our troubling properties who are willfully not responding to our code enforcement orders and some of the worst properties, we do use the criminal process for those. And that can still continue. It just won't be a criminal violation just to not register. So I just wanted to clarify some of that. In terms of the information that we're asking for, this slide really talks about essentially the required information. We're looking for the address, number of rental units, possibly collecting some information on average rents so that we understand where we are around affordability in the city. Name, address, email, phone number of the owner. If the owner's not a natural person, then contact information of a natural person associated with the ownership. Localized contacts who have care and control of the property with the ability to respond quickly. We talked about that earlier. And other information as required by the director by rule, like tax EIN or real estate license number, things such as that. So that's essentially, I know I breezed through that fairly quickly. I know we have a lot of speakers and like to make sure that they have an opportunity to get any of their questions answered. And council members, I'd be happy to answer any questions from you.
Thank you, Director. And I have a couple questions, and then Councilmember Beatty, if you have questions, and after that, we'll go into our public comment. If there are, I think, relevant questions, we'll make sure that we address those as well. And you really talked about what I call the loophole, not loophole, but the difference here that we're talking about, Director, a little bit. So I don't want to go through it again, but just want to underscore and clarify to folks that when we're talking about the difference between a code order and a code violation. But I would say that you could go into the discretion that some of our code officers have, right? And I think that I do want to get more at the spirit of what we're talking about here. I think we heard from many folks in the first hearing throughout this process that this is really about us talking about the worst of the worst actors, making sure that this is really about health and safety, right? We're not trying to ding folks just because you have high grass, right? You go cut the grass, it's fine. In many cases, I think that our code officers try to work with that property owner to remedy small things like that. So if you could just, again, reemphasize this difference between a code order and a code violation, but then also talk about kind of the discretion and the relationship that your officers have out in the community.
Sure, council member. First of all, yeah, the difference between a code violation and a code order is really that there could be several violations on a property. So we have a housing code that might require everything from not having litter to having your property in a good condition to high weeds, as you mentioned. It could be no heat, it could be no hot water, it could be literally dozens and dozens of violations of the housing code. Most often, all of those are dealt with in one order. So you might have one code order with multiple violations at a specific property. It is true that the way that we are proposing this registration is that it's really 5 code orders or building orders or housing or zoning orders, and we're not specifying what type of orders those are. But again, we already use so much discretion out of our code enforcement office that to get to 5 and 10 code orders in a given year,
You're just being negligent at that point.
for the most part. We did an analysis, as I said, today that would result in 1% of our properties, approximately 250 properties out of 25,000 that would be subject to 5 and 10 threshold that we picked. That notwithstanding that, we also plan to make sure that we build in a system that allows us to still have some discretion, so that if we do come to a property that has, say, 5 code orders in a 12-month period, and we can quickly ascertain that those are code orders that do not cause us an alarm or cause us to worry or jeopardize the property, that there might be a way that we can administratively keep them from rolling into a conditional status. So if it's 5 code orders on trivial violations that have already been remedied, we're looking at how can we make sure we build some kind of flexibility into. It's not our intention to capture those properties. Our intention is truly to try to capture those properties and negligent property owners who aren't caring for their residents.
And I appreciate you giving clarity to that. So thank you for that. We've heard, I think, from a lot of folks that the $20 fee coupled with, self-attestation will be passed on to residents if implemented, whether it be director or deputy director. If existing inspection results do not exist for a property, will the property owner need to get an official? So I think in the original one, we were saying that there had to be a certified person that comes out and does the inspection. I think we heard loud and clear that that was a barrier and a cost burden. In what's proposed now, is that still the case?
No. So the big change that we made under that is unless you're rolled over to conditional status, as you and I just talked about, 99% of our registrants will just be able to self-attest to the condition of their property. They will not require a paid, third-party inspector to come out. In the original proposal, we talked about HVAC inspectors or some other type of inspections that we might be requiring. The new revised proposal has none of that. And the only way you would be subject to a third-party inspection would be if you're conditional status.
Got it. And talk to me about that. What the self-attestation part, what are we actually talking about there? Is that for mica countertops? Is that the condition of the carpet? What are we talking about when we talking about what we're asking people to say is in working order?
So it'll be, in some cities, and we're kind of late to the game with the rental registry, to be honest. So we have a lot of cities that we have examples from. In many cities, the self-attestation is literally one sentence, where you're just essentially saying that, to your knowledge, there are no critical system or major system violations at the property. So your hot water works, the heat works, your major systems are working. We're not looking for anyone to self-attest that a battery is in a smoke detector or the grass is less than 3.5 inches or whatever minor violations people are concerned about. That is not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is people to be accountable for major critical systems that are harming our residents and our tenants around the city, landlords who are not taking care of those critical systems. And so we're looking for some validation from the owner that they've made sure that those critical systems are working properly.
And I appreciate that. And I think for a lot of folks that we have engaged with, that should be easy. I mean, they're saying that they're already doing these types of inspections annually or taking care of it. So that shouldn't be a barrier there. I think that is something, if folks are already doing it, shouldn't be a challenge. So given all of that, I think when we talk about the costs now and where we are, right, if you're not in conditional status, meaning that you don't have 5 code orders, not violations, but orders for 100 units or less, 10 for 100 above, we're talking about the cost to you is $20 per unit. All in is what the cost is to a property owner or operator.
That's correct, annually. So it'd be $20 divided by 12 for a monthly charge, less than $2 a unit. And also, I would want to highlight that we fully intend to make compliance extremely technologically simple. We'll have a website. People will be able to register online, pay their fees online. Use of technology is going to be of the utmost importance. We already process, 50,000 permits a year through the building department, so we know how to make things go quickly and easily and use technology to its fullest. And so we intend to continue that process. So the burden of actually registering and paying your fees administratively should be fairly straightforward.
Thank you for that. And just one last question, and I'm sorry, Councilmember Beatty. And this is probably more for Deputy Director Jones. When we talk about, another big thing that we heard through this is that this is duplicative, that this already exists at the county level. And I think that my argument there would be that then why do other cities have this, right? There's clearly some information lacking there. And so just simply not knowing who the property owner is, talk to me about, or talk to us about why it is that we are wanting to know who is in care and control, who has been an emergency person contact. And I wanted you to speak to that because there's been many incidences where we're talking about, and if you can help me also level set, I'm not talking about latitude. We're not talking about Colonial Village. We're talking about everyday things that happen in fourplexes and duplexes and single-family homes all across the city. Why is it critical that we know who the emergency contact is or who is responsible for just everyday communications? Like, how would that be helpful not only to us, but also to the community?
Sure. Thank you very much, Councilmember, for the time. I would take it back to the earlier question that you gave the director about the relationship between code enforcement and the property owner. Usually when code enforcement is coming out, it is to help find a productive way to solve an issue to ensure that a resident can remain housed. And in some scenarios, that property manager may not be on site to immediately react. As the director said, if that issue can be solved on site, we're not issuing the violation or the order. We're going to work towards a solution to keep that person housed. So ensuring that there is timely contact is really important to be able to do that. There's examples of sometimes if there's a sewer backup in one unit, we're not vacating a whole building, that one unit needs to be resolved. We had an earlier scenario where with all the water meter switches that we've been doing and updating as a city, there was a property where they were unable to access the water meter in order to change it out, and there was no property manager on site or that we could get in contact with in a timely enough fashion to hopefully prevent a vacate. We were able to coordinate and get there, but those are examples of where being able to engage with somebody locally and that is going to be responsive quickly allows us to mitigate a lot of the longer term stuff that then turns into the larger scenarios for some properties, and most importantly allows us hopefully in the best conditions to keep people safely housed. I will say from an enforcement perspective, we do offer relocation assistance with our recent code change. And so what we run into is for landlords where the city has taken on the expense, we need to be able to invoice and get payment from those landlords who we've had to incur the costs. And we have to go through the exact same process as Director Messer does. And so it's very important to us to be able to have access to the individuals that we need to hold accountable for the assistance that we had to provide as a city as well.
Thank you for that context. Councilmember Beatty, any questions for you at this point?
Yeah, I have one question for the director. In your studies of a review of the programs in other cities, what have you found the compliance rate to be?
So it's thanks, Councilmember, for that question. It's kind of all over the board, but generally speaking, there's going to be an initial startup period where compliance will be a little slower. But take a city like Cleveland, who's been doing this for a decade or more. They're at about 60%. In terms of a compliance rate on a regular basis, and that's kind of a rolling amount. People drop on, people drop off. But at any given time, there's a guess that the compliance rate is around 60%. But when you look at cities, and that's kind of the average, that 50 or 60%, it's really apples to oranges because every city is different. Take Cincinnati, they probably have 80,000 rental units, and we're guessing we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 230,000 rental units. So when you look at a percentage of compliance, we expect that we have a lot more larger facilities. Half of our rental units, I believe, are covered by how many properties, Ryan? The top half, 140,000?
140,000, 1,300 properties.
Yeah, so 1,300 properties account for 140,000 of our units. And so if we have a much higher compliance rate at some of our larger complexes, we're hopeful that we can have a higher compliance rate in general than some of the other cities that we compare to.
Thank you.
And to that point about compliance as well, Director, I know that we have, there's technology that we want to utilize as well that will help us get to that compliancy, pulling data to be able to, so for instance, for folks that think that they're going to be bad actors who are just not going to register, that may be true. But some of the tools that we have at our ability, I think some of the other databases that we have purchased, aggregating the data that we're going to get, we will be able to notify someone like we believe that you are a rental property. I mean, at some point, right, to really get to that compliance that we're trying to get to. You know, I'm aggressive. I told you I want 100%, like in day 2 of the registry, but
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to get there. But if you could just talk about, I think, how we're also going to, the technology piece of this, that when we talk about the cost associated with it and why that is also important.
Yeah, so we have the luxury of already have passing some legislation in the city dealing with vacant and foreclosed property registry, which has given us a head start to really look at the software that's available and programs for these registrations and registries across the country. And we're actually excited about being able to merge a lot of that data and combine a lot of the data gathering to be useful tools in our strategic efforts in the various departments, development and building and zoning. So we definitely think our use of technology is going to help us. Just to give you an idea, I know we don't have hard and fast budget numbers just yet, and we're still working on what that would look like because we're still working on the program. But for our own purposes, we are expecting our larger landlords, say 100 units or more, to be more around 75% compliance right out of the gate, and some of our smaller 1, 2, 3 family, 4 family duplexes, places like that, to start out at more of a 25% compliance rate and build from there. So we are making assumptions. They're guesses, but they're rational guesses based on a lot of data and information in comparison to other cities, Councilmember, like you mentioned. So those are our assumptions that we're making for compliance rates.
Yeah, and let me ask this other question. I think I heard you mention that, there's a lot of short-term rentals, and we do have a short-term rental registry. So a unit that's used as that's a short-term rental and on the short-term registry, they would not have to register that unit on the general rental registry, or is it just, there's still a place for that somewhere?
That's correct. They would
maybe
not
that
have
would
to
go into a cost.
register, they would not have to register on the rental registry. The rental registry, the key word, I guess, for us is that it's a residential rental registry. So what we're really trying to accomplish are residents, places where people are living. So hotels, motels, short-term rentals, other, licenses and rooming houses and boarding houses and other things that are already licensed under other parts of the code, they're not covered under this registry. This is a true residential rental registry.
Okay.
All right. I think there will be more questions throughout the process, so Councilmember, feel free to jump in. We will now, and thank you, Director Messer and Deputy Director Jones. We will now move into the public comment portion of the hearing. As of yesterday's 5 p.m. deadline, we did receive 3 pieces of written testimony, so I want to acknowledge those folks and thank them as well. So Christy Hayes, the Executive Director of Make a Day, Betty Janes, and Carol Marquino. Those pieces of testimony will be provided to all members. Please note that these do not include, I think, emails and phone calls our office continues to receive day to day. Poor JP, 2 minutes before this hearing was getting phone calls about this. So I appreciate him and all the advocacy from folks that have gone into this. These submissions, again, have been submitted to all council offices ahead of the meeting, and we'll continue to make sure we get that to all of our colleagues. We also received 18 requests for in-person testimony. So for all speakers, When you come up, please state your name and any affiliated organization, if applicable, and you will have 3 minutes. And first up, we have Mr. Steve Gladman, followed by, and on deck is Miss Daisy Chamberlain and Deb Krantz. So again, if I called your name and you're on deck, just come on down and form a line. We got 18 folks. We're going to try to get through this as expeditiously as possible. Mr. Gladman, the floor is yours.
Thank
And I think
you,
you know the rules around here, so I don't need to explain them to
Councilman
you.
Bankston and Councilman Beatty. The Columbus Apartment Association remains opposed to the rental registry inspection protocol. We believe a separate city registry is duplicative and unnecessary, that the proposed $20 per unit rental tax is excessive and not tied to documented program cost, and the revised inspection model requires additional refinement to ensure fairness. The city states that the separate registry is needed because no one registers with the county. According to the county auditor's data, the compliance rate is about 60 to 65% of those properties that they believe should be registered. They use land use codes to determine whether a property is subject to rental registry or not. So that's the numbers that they have. And I guess the question is, how will the city know if the property is not registered? Are you going to use the county database to help determine that? And if you're going to use that database, why create your own, separate database? The county data shows that a large number of those properties that aren't registered, single-family homes that are used for rental, along with some doubles and 4 units. Most of the properties that are owned and managed by CAA members have rental offices, so it's pretty easy to get a hold of folks at those properties, and we don't believe that most of our members create a problem about not being able to notify and not being responsive. The proposed $20 rental tax would generate about $3 or $4 million. It's unclear thus that the program would cost that much to operate. Also, the city, as indicated earlier, believes that the compliance rate in other cities is about 50 to 60%. It seems that what you're asking is for those 60% that comply to subsidize with the fee the operation of this program for those people that are not compliant, which is fundamentally unfair. We haven't really seen the budget, as the director said, they're still working on that, so it's impossible for us to determine, how the $20 fee was derived and whether that it has a nexus with what it's going to cost to operate the program. This will result in some additional cost to the tenant, and you can say, what's only $2 a month? There's also administrative fees that will be incurred by the operation, and the history over the last few years is council consistently talks about housing affordability, but continues to pass legislation, the bundle of Housing for All legislation. All of that contain things that cause owners of multifamily properties administrative cost. So as a bundle, so it's layer on layer on layer. We're not talking about, $20, it's excessive in itself, but it's the combination of those things that become a problem. May I just short continuation or?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I also submitted more detailed testimony to your office. I appreciate the director's willingness to use discretion, but that's nowhere in the proposal is there any discretion. It's very clear. It talks about violations, and an owner should not be punished for correcting an order in a timely manner. The director did a good job of talking about orders and violations, but if you get 10 orders or 5 orders, depending on the size, you're going to be thrown in this category. You're going to be penalized. You're going to be tainted as a bad actor. Why would you be penalizing people that get an order and comply with it? What we need to focus on are those orders that are not complied. So if I get an order and I don't fix it, then that makes a lot of sense to me. You would proceed at a different level of enforcement. Large properties, especially those that are older, have significant maintenance requests every day that are complied with. They may end up with orders in excess of 10, but if they're complying with them within a few days, why are they being penalized? Why are they being categorized in the same way as someone who just ignores the city's orders completely. So while I appreciate discretion, there's no discretion in the language that we've seen up to this point. We appreciate the effort of your office in working with us and continuing this process. We still feel that at this point, the registry is not needed, it's too costly, and it's still not focused enough on really the bad actors. The net is too wide. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gladman. I know you've been engaged with us on this, and I appreciate a lot of the feedback that you have given has really got us to this point. I do want to just clarify some things. We have never said that no one is registering. We've just clearly stated that there is deficiencies in the registry that the county has. Additionally, the county doesn't have any enforcement mechanisms or protocols. And again, this is not simply about who owns the property. We're trying to get at who is the person that we need to contact, who has emergency responsibilities, who has care and control of the property. I know the apartment association and you all's organization are unique in the fact that they are managed by companies or their larger complexes. And so do understand that, but there are also large complexes that have problems every single day, and we deal with that. I think that to your point about the order, we absolutely are thankful for folks that comply with orders, but if we're seeing that many orders in a single year, for us that signals a problem. So if there's larger issues, then let's take a look at that. You know, one of the things that we're thinking about, and it's in my comments later, but also want to be sure is that this is not simply about a stick, it is also about carrots. So for instance, if there are major mechanical problems, instead of just putting a Band-Aid on it, and you're one of our critical affordable housing partners, how can we think about using our bond dollars to help with fixing that critical piece of equipment? Because it's not as simply about who owns the property. For us, it's about who occupies that property. And we want them to be in safe housing that is safe, that is housing that you and I would want to be in. So again, I hear some of your comments. We continue to, I think, make adjustments to that, and we'll continue to engage with you. So appreciate the testimony, appreciate the continued advocacy.
I'd like to say we are also very concerned about who lives in those properties. Those are our customers. Mm-hmm. That's our client base. You know, additional cost to them is not helpful, to the property is not helpful, to the residents. Every dollar that's spent on compliance is a dollar that's not available to maintain the property. Thank you.
Yep, thank you again. Next, we have Ms. Daisy Chamberlain. Then on deck, we have Ms. Deb Krantz. And then followed by her will be Beth Fetzer-Rice.
Good afternoon. I'm Daisy Chamberlain, and I'm a member of Rhema Christian Center. And I have with me Kathy Levine, and we both serve on the Protect Renters Now Committee of the BREAD organization. We only have one speaker here today, but we have many people here in support of the registry. So I would like to ask the BREAD members to stand as I make the presentation. Thank you. BREAD is a Columbus area organization of 40 diverse faith congregations that build power to press public officials to implement proven solutions to serious community problems. First, Councilmember Bankston, we would like to thank you for listening to us and committing on May 13th of this year before 1,318 people to introduce legislation for a citywide rental registry that would provide regular, proactive rental inspections. BREAD pushed proactive rental inspections to take the burden off members who having to report a code violation to the city to get action from landlords who refuse to make vital repairs for such conditions as no heat in the winter or major plumbing and electrical problems. We heard multiple stories from renters who refrained from calling code enforcement for fear their complaint could trigger landlord retaliation, a rent increase, or an eviction. We learned that regular proactive inspections were the only way to hold irresponsible landlords accountable. We met with you in June and September to share our research and discuss what to include in a rental registry. You asked us to attend the first public hearing and provide our support for your original proposal, which incorporated our main recommendations. We turned out nearly 100 BREAD members and provided multiple statements from our members in support of key provisions we wanted, especially proactive inspections to take the burden off renters for having to report unsafe conditions. We understand that following the hearing, you heard from other key stakeholders. We received the dramatically revised proposal and met with city staff to understand the changes. BREAD determined that we were willing to accept the greatly scaled-down proposal, except for two crucial items. First, we want the city to set clear outcome measures in the first years so we know what is working and what needs improvement. Second, and most importantly, under the new proposal, 99% of landlords would simply attest to that property that it's up to code without any independent inspections. Thus, the new system still depends on renter complaints when landlords refuse to make needed repairs. The city has already recognized that the complaint-driven system does not work. Councilmember Bankston, as you committed to us before, we are asking you to include some form of proactive inspections on a representative sample of units in the first years of the program. This will put all landlords on notice that they must have their properties in safe and well-maintained condition or face enforcement from the city. We want a system that protects renters now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Chamberlain, and thank you, Kathy, and to the entire BREAD organization, and I appreciate that. Everything for me is about context. What I said was I would absolutely propose something that has proactive code enforcement, and that is what we did. That has always been my intention. I think through not only feedback from the folks that we've other engaged with, but also the process by which that is, it is a larger barrier. But I think that we want to continue to work with you to figure out how we get there. The biggest point of this is how are we addressing the bad landlords and those stories that we hear, right? And I will be clear. You and I know this, and we've talked about this. There are even landlords in BREAD's organization that had stepped up and testified here. 99%, I would say, just as much as there's 99% of our tenants, 99% of our landlords are good folks doing what they're supposed to do, right? Maybe it's not necessarily, again, maybe it's not granite countertops and stainless steel property, stainless steel appliances, but they are providing safe and decent housing. That is not what this is about. This is about that 1% that comes to us, comes to you all, that every single day that this is happening. So that's where I think that this proposal focuses that. But again, I will say this is still a proposal. We're going to continue to engage with you all. I know that I wasn't able to be at this last update meeting, and I apologize for that because I had a conflict, but my aide was there, and we did talk about what does it look like to have proactive code enforcement for the portfolio that is the rental registry. Right now, that doesn't give us the insight of what's happening in the building, but I think if we can see huge glaring issues outside, that helps us to get to a place where we can talk about what is the condition on the inside. So I think that we still have room to talk, room to get to a place that helps meet middle ground. But I said to this room the last time that I want, when we don't get what we want, to continue to engage. So I want to thank BREAD and all of you for being here, for continuing to engage, because that means a lot to us. It means a lot to the process as we move forward, right? I told folks on the call the other day, I was like, they was all cheering for me in the first hearing. Now they're going to come at me with pitchforks and tar feathers. That's fine, because that's what we said was going to happen. But I think that this is a part of the process. So I want to thank you all for engaging in it from the very beginning. and being, I think, leaders out front on this issue and continuing to push us. We announced this, and I think that you all made sure that we held it accountable to it. And so we're going to continue to do that. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Deb Krantz, followed by Beth Fetzer-Rice. And then on deck, we have Raymond Holzer, in that order.
Hi, I'm Deb Krantz. I'm a member of the Central Ohio Real Estate Entrepreneurs. I am here speaking on my own behalf, though, not as a part of the organization.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you, Councilmember Bankston, for the opportunity to testify on this proposal. I didn't expect to be called up quite so soon, but I would expect that I would echo many of the sentiments against the implementation of the rental registry and the inspection requirement. I am both a rental housing provider and a lender to other rental housing providers. If my borrowers all sell their properties in Columbus, as some have already and many plan to do as a result of this, and they pay off their loans due to the onerous and largely unnecessary regulations, that will negatively impact my business. If Columbus is no longer an attractive investment location for small investors, which is who I lend to, I would have no choice but to look elsewhere for business prospects. I maintain that the registry represents collective punishment. You've identified a 1% offender population, and I love that that's the population that is being identified and focused on. I think that makes perfect sense. I've probed into this, and I have yet to find a report from a community with a rental registry that demonstrates true value to the community. This proposal doesn't address how the results would be measured, other than possibly reducing vacate orders. Again, noble, but not necessarily applying to the 99% of us that are compliant with our properties. I also haven't seen a full budget for this registry. Somebody mentioned somewhere between $2.5 and $4 million to be gathered as a result of the fees, but I haven't seen how those are actually going to be dispensed. As has been pointed out, the registry won't make rentals any more affordable. It won't prevent a water line from bursting or a furnace from failing at the worst possible time. These things happen, and responsible property owners take care of them post-haste. Irresponsible property owners don't, and likely have violations that provide the story that should be followed. In my experience as a lender, I personally observed the failing of code enforcement and City of Columbus prosecutors to hold egregious violators accountable for the collateral that secures the loans that I have made, accepting excuse after excuse for repairs not being made in a timely manner. I would ask you to make better laws and less bureaucracy for the departments to follow. Like many property owners, property taxes on my rental properties increased substantially in 2025. In my case, property taxes rose between 175% and 325% across my portfolio. It's quite a windfall for Franklin County. It's a windfall that amounts to approximately $18 million to the Franklin County General Fund. Rather than duplicating a rental registry, I urge this committee to demand that Franklin County alter and enforce their rental registry for properties in the City of Columbus, and within demonstrated reason and law, make it more useful for your purposes. More support should be allocated to pursue the most problematic property owners through diligent and timely code enforcement. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Krantz. I do have one question, what you said, of being someone who lends to folks. What about this makes our market unattractive? If again, everything is on the up and up and it's $20, what would make that unattractive for investors?
I speak for myself, and I would also speak for my borrowers. I don't force inspections upon them as the lender. It's not really something that we do. There is a trust factor, and we would rely on code enforcement to provide us with any violations, of course, that would be occurring. Part of that problem is, as the lender, I don't get copies of those, so I don't really have a way of enforcing it myself. So there are a lot of, I think we spoke on a call, there are housing providers that are saying, this is just one more thing that I'm going to have to comply with. There's an expense associated with it that I'm already allocating, a small amount, but some amount to having someone responsible on the Franklin County registry. It's just one more obstacle. We're doing our best to provide a very good product, and we're selective about the people that are able to enjoy that product, and we expect some things of them as well. So there's a push and pull, and when it feels like there's too much push or a little more push than there is pull, then some people will just say, you know what, it's just not worth it. I've seen it happen in other communities. I've seen it happen in Cincinnati in particular, and I've seen it happen in Cleveland as well. I don't want to see that happen in Columbus. I think we have a vibrant community, and 99% of us are well within the regulations and providing good housing for folks. The 1% are the people that are making it bad for everybody. Again, the collective punishment is really what I push that into.
Got it. Thank you for that. And just for that clarification, I do want to say to one thing that you mentioned that we have mentioned in previous hearings that I didn't mention this time is that we are working to ensure that if you submit information to us, that will go to the county registry and that those compliances work together. So that helps to relieve some of that administrative burden. But absolutely hear some of your concerns, and thank you again for engaging with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Next, we have Beth Fetzer-Rice, Raymond Holsers on deck, and then Aaron Sink after that. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Good evening, council members, Bankston and Beatty, and important city staff behind me. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in favor of Columbus's proposed rental registry. My name is Beth Fetzer-Rice, and I'm the CEO of a local nonprofit called Home for Families. As a valuable partner agency working within Columbus's homelessness response system, Home for Families rehouses more than 1,200 families per year who are experiencing homelessness and severe housing insecurity. We are proud partners of the city's Resilient Housing Initiative and the city's Vacated Tenants Program, where we work with partners to stabilize and rehouse Columbus families displaced by code enforcement action. As a frontline provider, we see every day how critical safe, stable housing is to the health of our families, our youth, and our community. Working with landlords, low-income housing landlords, is a really important part of our work at Home for Families. These landlords are essential allies in our mission, and we are not proponents of regulations that would place undue burdens on them, anything that would lead to rent increases, or for them to stop working with us entirely. Of our extensive landlord base, the majority are kind, they're responsible, and they treat our families with fairness and dignity. There are, however, a percentage who do not meet these standards. These are the landlords who repeatedly neglect our tenants and our requests for maintenance, they ignore code enforcement, and they put our families' safety and security at risk. Families that struggle to find housing in the first place and then also are highly, highly vulnerable. That is why I believe a rental registry is so important. We have seen what can happen when accountability is diminished or absent. Colonial Village, Latitude 525 are painful reminders of the damage that can occur. Hundreds of residents displaced, families and individuals forced into shelters that are already stretched to the breaking point, and millions of dollars spent on emergency damage control. Millions of dollars that could have gone toward proactive and preventable solutions supporting homelessness and affordable housing. A rental registry is an important initiative that can help us shift from reaction to prevention. It protects families by holding landlords accountable before conditions deteriorate to a community crisis, and it supports responsible landlords by distinguishing them from those with habitual violations. I would like to acknowledge and thank City Council for your commitment, your ongoing commitment to addressing our region's affordable housing crisis. Through your suite of Housing for All policy proposals and initiatives, you've demonstrated leadership and vision for our community. I see the rental registry as a natural complement to these efforts. In closing, a rental registry is a powerful step forward, one that's needed to help ensure the housing we fight so hard to create and preserve is truly safe and sustainable for our families and our community. On behalf of my organization, Home for Families, and the families and the youth we serve, thank you for your time tonight and your commitment to housing justice.
Thank you again, Bethan. Thank you for all the work that you're doing on the front line. As you know, we were partners in this work when I was at Gladden Community House, and I know that we talk about those glaring things of Colonial Village and Latitude and what happened there. And I would say to folks, although those are outliers, if we had a registry in place, the repetitive cycle of properties like that just transfer from one LLC to the other LLC without addressing any of the concerns, just to squeeze as much profit as they can out of it and then resell it again, that wouldn't have been able to happen.
Absolutely, and I think
Because those
that-
code orders
Yeah.
that were there, they wouldn't have been able to transfer that registry without addressing those first.
Yes,
And so also, we would have been able to get ahead of it
yep,
and been able to be more proactive and not spend $8 million of taxpayer dollars.
that's right.
That's $8 million that honestly could have gone into our emergency rental assistance program that has went back to help very good landlords who are probably in this room today. So that is, I would want to say, when we talk about those outsized ones, because everyone thinks that those are just anomalies. Yes, they are, but they are very much get at even some of those vacates that we see every single day at the single family and duplex level. So I just want to clarify that this again is not the same as the county registry. It is not just checking a box. It is giving us a tool that really can help to set an atmosphere here that if you are going to be a housing provider, that there are stipulations to providing that housing. And so I just wanted to clarify that point. I wanted to underscore that because I think that we kind of just gloss over it sometimes because we don't want to just pick at those two because it's not what the majority of folks are, and we know that. But those are clear examples that would show us that if this was in place, it could have been avoided.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you when you were
No, that's
giving-
okay. I completely agree. I think one of the things that I think is most important is that not being able to just kind of transfer your problems and have, kind of sell your way out of it. Providers knew for a very long time that both of those complexes, they had issues and they just kept getting sold and really felt powerless to do anything. And we're still, as a community, dealing with the fallout from that. We lost hundreds and hundreds of units that will not be replaced, and Colonial Village is back up and hopefully doing well. But affordable housing crisis is so real, and our families have, I think it's now 4 units or maybe even 5 low-income units for every one family that needs it. We need to preserve and take care of every single one we have. So that's why I'm in favor of this. I know, I'm not trying to punish good landlords. We have lots of them, but it's really the ones that are, when we're working with code enforcement, we see the effect on families and kids. It's just not necessary.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you again
thank you.
for all your work.
Thank you.
Next is Raymond Holzer, followed by Aaron Sink, and then Michael Guzman, in that order. Raymond Holzer, going once? Nope. Okay.
Councilman?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Councilman Brady.
The issue of the county registry keeps coming up. As I recall from the first hearing, we had some testimony and also a written document from the county auditor, which spoke to the, it was almost a report of self-deficiency as to that, the current county registry. I don't know if you or the director could think back to that hearing and what were the high points of that testimony
Yeah,
about what they said was missing.
and I'll let Deputy Director Jones opine on that because I think she probably has some more details. But I would say to your point, I think overwhelmingly what we heard from the Franklin County Auditor himself is that there were limitations to what he is able to do, and that he also gave us even recommendations to strengthen what we were even proposing. So even our county auditor who manages the registry per the ORC understands its limitations, but also more importantly, I think, understands the limitations of his office from an enforcement compliance standpoint, and also that their job is just simply to check a box and to collect information. It is not to get at some of the health and safety issues that we're trying to address with ours. Deputy Director Jones, I don't know if you want to, you probably may have some more details
Yeah.
than I do. I don't have it with me.
No, I think, council members, you both recall correctly, and this team is here with us because they just passed down the letter to us. So, I will just read directly from his letter, which was to reiterate that due to the statute, for which the ORC governs the rental registry at the county level is constructed. It has limited enforcement authority and minimal penalties for noncompliance. As a result of these shortcomings, it is difficult to ensure adequate participation, which then undermines the registry's effectiveness for the county. He emphasizes the importance of flexibility to create requirements and collect information that's valuable to the municipality versus what the ORC outlines. So back to them not being duplicative because it is different information that we are requesting, different opportunities to integrate data. And then as the auditor has pointed out and others have, the ORC limits his ability to actually make any improvements and create better alignment for efficiency of one singular registry countywide.
Thank you for that, Deputy Director. And shout out to Graham. I'm like, that wasn't even like a planned question. You just had the letter just ready to go. So there you go. So I think we said Raymond Holster is not here, so we'll move on to Aaron Sink. There we go. Michael Guzman, you are on deck, and then followed by Michael will be Remington Lyman. So if you all could just get in that order. Aaron,
Hello.
the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm Aaron Sinks. So I'm a local landlord, and I've had properties for quite a few years here in Columbus. And anytime we've ever had an issue with code enforcement, I call them directly, reach out to them, I send them an email and say, hey, tell us what we need to do. Let's get this done and closed. So, and I've actually bought in a handful of the problem properties that have gone through the environmental process and stuff like that. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the issues that exist. And while I'm all for change, I feel like we need to go after that 1% on a greater level. So a perfect example, I have a rental property, and 2 years ago, the house next door was hit by the SWAT team. And I mean, it was a drug house. It was a lot of problems. My tenants were calling 311. I had called 311. So the SWAT team hit the house, blew out all the windows, cleared the people out. 2 years later, they have not fixed those windows. That house is still a vacant house. There's unhoused folks going in and out all the time. The city's constantly out there. The city's in contact with that property owner. They just do nothing. So is there a way, if you do something along the registry, is there a way that you can put penalties on this 1%, special assessment taxes, whatever it might be, so that these folks, I mean, honestly, in a way to kind of push them to sell, right? If you're not going to fix up the property, get rid of it. I mean, it's been 2 years, and we have to look at that every time we go over there. And I feel like, charging a fee, to the good folks that really aren't causing a problem could, that's kind of, it's treating everybody in the same bucket. But I think we should go after the bad actors on a deeper level that, than we have in the past. I mean, you could drive by today and there's code violations on the door. I mean, who has a house that has broken windows for 2 years? Mm-hmm. It's an out-of-city investor, a local Ohio investor. Code enforcement knows them. They've spoken with them. They just refuse to fix it.
Yeah. And thank you for that, your testimony, Mr. Sink. And thank you for being one of our good housing providers that are investing in our neighborhoods. I think that is some of the deficiencies we see with the current system and the legal process. And I apologize because our city attorney isn't here, because then they could probably give you all the legalese. Director Messer, I don't know if you want to speak to, again, that lengthy process that we typically have to go through with the court system and when we're talking about these kinds of situations.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It is true that we struggle sometimes with enforcement on some of our more irresponsible landlords around the city, but we are aggressive. We do partner regularly with the city attorney to hold folks accountable, go through our environmental court system, but yes, the legal process can be laborious, and a lot of technicalities and a lot of notice requirements and a lot of hearings and a lot of court schedule issues. And attorneys get involved, and it just can become very cumbersome, as you point out. We're very hopeful that this registry will be another tool in our toolbox to be able to deal with some of those landlords. But I also want to focus on, while that is a big part of this, we're also very excited about a lot of the information and data collection and other things that we're going to get from this registry that can help us as a city being more strategic and moving forward. But the enforcement piece is definitely something that's going to be an extra tool in our toolbox that I'm looking forward to.
And one other thing that Mr. Sink mentioned, Director, if you could speak to it, I think you've spoken to it before. I probably can't speak to it as a city attorney, but the targeting of certain type of properties and why we have to have a program that looks at an entire portfolio or looks at the entire city, and why there's been case law and things that we've come up against when we simply try to just target certain folks.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. It's very challenging for us as a government entity we have to comply with a lot of the state law and court cases and case law that have been passed. And some of our more problematic landlords have been very successful at challenging efforts that we take that are targeted type of efforts where, we can all sit in here and say, well, why don't you just spend all of your time on the 1% and just ignore the 99%? Well, that does have some legal challenges. There's some legal issues that arise from that where, just targeting folks that we think are bad actors ends up with some constitutional problems.
Thank you for that. But I will say, I definitely took a note here around, to your point around the penalty and fines piece. How do we make it more painful for those bad actors to operate in our city? So again, thank you for that, and hope you continue to engage in the process.
Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Next is Michael Guzman. Michael, don't think I see him. Remington Lyman, let's see, Remington, come on up. Also, then on deck, is Michael P. Edwards, followed by Donnie Thompson. Remington, welcome to the council.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Bankston. Good evening. My name is Remington Lyman. I'm a small business owner, and I'm the broker of Reefco Real Estate on Parsons Avenue. We have about 40 licensed real estate agents, and many of them are also small business owners, landlords, and independent real estate professionals. I'm asking you to oppose this proposal because it adds fees, paperwork, and bureaucracy without actually fixing the properties that cause the problems. 99% of landlords, like you said, already maintain their units, follow the rules. This registry creates new costs for responsible operators while barely affecting the small number of true problem properties. The city already has enforcement tools. Please use those before creating a system that repeats information that the city already has. These added fees and compliance requirements will raise rents, push out small mom and pop owners like myself, and make Columbus less attractive for new housing investments. When those owners leave, large institutional buyers move in and affordability drops. And relying on self-attestation doesn't stop the bad actors. The city should focus enforcement on the handful of addresses with repeat violations instead of creating new rules for everyone. I urge you to slow this down, target enforcement where it is actually needed, and avoid a registry that will reduce affordable housing and increase costs for Columbus residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lyman, and I appreciate you engaging. I know that we've had several conversations, and so I think a lot of that feedback has been incorporated in this review, and we'll continue to engage with you. Next, we have Michael P. Edwards, followed by Donnie Thompson, and then, and I pronounce Mahmoud Samuel Diouf, and I apologize if I butchered that. Please correct me. Michael, thank you for coming to council.
Good evening, Councilman, and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Michael Edwards, and I am a housing and community economic development attorney at Legal Aid. Much of my work at Legal Aid focuses on representing tenants facing housing conditions problems and other struggles with their landlords. I want to start to say that Columbus has many excellent landlords, people who fix problems right away and take pride in providing safe homes. But our current rental safety system doesn't distinguish them from the minority who chronically neglect their properties or retaliate against tenants. And because code enforcement is reactive, usually responding only to after a tenant complaint, the city never sees many dangerous units. Tenants are often too afraid of retaliation to report issues, meaning some of our worst properties have no documented violations at all. I refer you to the client that we mentioned at the last hearing, Irene. Previously homeless, Irene sought assistance from a community organization to get connected to a landlord with an available single-family house for herself and her family. Unfortunately, from the moment she entered that property, the conditions were uninhabitable. Irene was too afraid to contact code enforcement. It was only after legal aid got involved that they were brought in, and when code enforcement stepped in, that landlord retaliated against her, shutting off her water. That's why relying on landlords' self-attestation, while as useful, can be risky. Under the current proposal, many properties can simply certify that they meet housing code standards, even if no inspector has set foot in the building. We already know affidavits can't be relied on. Our own 10th District Court of Appeals ended eviction by affidavit in 2020 because affidavits alone weren't trustworthy. We shouldn't rely on them to certify housing safety either. So we're proposing 3 possible improvements. Option 1 keeps self-attestation but adds accountability by placing all self-attested units into a pool and randomly inspect a small percentage each year. This increases visibility to code and tests the accuracy of the landlord certifications. Option 2 requires the city to eventually inspect every self-attested property on a rolling basis over several years instead of one. This, again, gives code enforcement the capacity to continue focusing on higher risk properties, the 1%, while still ensuring full oversight. Option 3 eliminates self-attestation altogether and requires an inspection for every property. Recognizing capacity limits of code enforcement, landlords could use licensed third-party home inspectors. To ensure honesty, the inspectors must be licensed. The city, not the landlord, should pay them and increase the fee for registration to cover those costs. Code enforcement must set strict inspection standards for those third-party inspectors so every inspector follows that same checklist. Any of these options would dramatically improve the reliability of the registry and prevent unsafe units from slipping through the cracks. If I could, just for a minute, 3 seconds more.
Please.
Also, the local operator requirement, we would like to address. The current proposal allows a landlord with 10 or more units to designate any Ohio licensed realtor, even one who lives out of state, as a local operator. A tenant with a flooded apartment can't rely on someone in New Jersey to manage an emergency. We propose requiring that the licensed realtor, Ohio licensed realtor who also lives within 100 miles of the rental unit. This would ensure the tenants have someone nearby who they can respond to. We also would like, and also a local operator must have authority to start repairs, at least for emergency violations. Many times, our tenant clients get caught between a property manager who blames the owner for not authorizing the repair and an owner who blames the property manager for not requesting authority. The safety of Columbus residents should not be left up to who wins the blame game. Requiring authority to start repairs speeds remedy, promoting safe housing and legal compliance. A stronger inspection system, whether through random sampling, phased oversight, or universal third-party inspections, ensures safer homes, fairer competition, and a greater public trust. These reforms don't punish responsible landlords, they protect them. They stop negligent operators from undercutting those who play by the rules. And most importantly, they protect tenants who have been afraid to speak up. Again, I thank you for our time today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Edwards, for the work you do with legal aid, as well as for those recommendations. I did take note of those. One thing that you did bring up that I think was a change that I'm going to have either Deputy Director Jones or Graham talk about is that local operator piece.
Yes.
That was specifically, I think, tied to some of engagement that we had, particularly with our real estate individuals about licensure and that type of thing. But I'm going to let Graham or Deputy Director Jones speak to that because they can speak to it much more eloquently than I can.
Sure.
Yeah, so the exceptions that we have for the local operator are, there's two of them. One is that if you're a licensed real estate agent in Ohio, there is no local operator. And the thinking behind that was that a person with a license essentially has skin in the game, that even if they're living in New Jersey, their license is at risk if they fail to maintain the property. So we felt a little bit more comfortable giving them leeway because they do have a license. There is kind of an existing accountability structure there. And for the second one was for small owners, if you own less than 10 total units, you don't necessarily need a local operator who is, has taken on legal responsibility for the property. A lot of these smaller owners are just simply not going to have a professional property management company. They're kind of handling stuff on a case-by-case basis. I think code feels pretty confident that in those kind of one-off situations, they can handle them. And we don't want to burden kind of your typical snowbird who might be running out to a family member or something like that, requiring them to go out and hire a company.
Understood. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And if I may,
Sure.
I just wanted to respond to that the expediency is something that we've experienced with our clients as far as having someone available, and that's why when we bring these proposals, because there are often times where our clients will not have anyone to reach out to in those emergency situations, regardless of the size of the property. And so that's why we were, even with someone who has skin in the game, have someone nearby, or at least within a general radius of being able to respond. That was all our
Gotcha.
And
concern was.
I will just add, I don't know if that was in the slide, and I apologize if it wasn't. Even if you don't have a local operator who is like legal, can care, control the property, you still have to identify an emergency contact. We would be flexible in who that is. There
Right.
needs to be someone local that picks up the phone. We're flexible as who that would be in those situations when it's a smaller owner.
And who would have authority to do the repairs. That was something else that was important too, because sometimes we talk to people, it's like, they talk to them and they say, well, we don't have the authority, we have to get back to you, and that becomes something more of a delay.
Yeah. Thank you for that call out.
Thank you.
Yep. Next, we have Donnie Thompson, followed by Mamadou Samuel Diofa. I think I hopefully pronounced it better that time. And then followed by Christopher Jackson. And Donnie?
Yeah,
welcome
good
to council.
evening. Thank you so much for allowing me the time to speak here tonight. My name is Donnie Thompson, Realtor and Property Manager with Real Solution Realty. I have been a residential property manager in Columbus since 2005 and also an investor in the same market. I currently manage over 1,600 units in the Franklin County with more than 400 owners worldwide that own those actual properties. A large majority of my clients have come from other property managers or brokers who prefer not to handle the type of housing that my team specializes in, primarily affordable housing and Section 8 rentals. We currently manage over 400 Section 8 homes here in Columbus. Every one of my clients understands both the risk and the potential costs associated with purchasing and maintaining these properties. I understand them as well, both as an investor and as the owner of a property management company. Nearly 20 years ago, I knew that this would be my niche, and I've worked very hard to achieve that type of business. In 2 decades, I have raised my management fees only once. I know the financial pressures investors face, and I strive to provide the best service possible at a reasonable rate to give them every opportunity to remain profitable. And I also ensure that the owner understands the value of maintaining a quality home. Doing so allows us to rent units faster, retain tenants longer, and reduce turnover costs. Our company receives over 200 city code violations per year. I believe we maintain an excellent reputation with city code officers. Many of them contact me directly when they see that I am the registered local contact on the county's required registry. Over the past year, we have seen declines in rental amounts for both self-pay and Section 8 tenants, while property insurance and taxes have increased significantly. These pressures have created a major burden for my owner clients. Several have already chosen to sell their portfolios because the profit margins have dropped so drastically. I mention all this because any additional costs imposed by the city, whether on management companies or property owners, must be paid from somewhere. These increases will not result in a free pass for the tenants. If my costs rise, my management fees will have to increase. If owners' costs rise, rents will have to increase. And when the rents rise, we lose a large portion of our applicants who cannot afford the so-called affordable housing. Real Solutions Realty serves approximately 200 three-day notices per month currently. And we work extremely hard to prevent these situations from turning into evictions by securing rental assistance. The majority of our tenants never get evicted. However, if rents rise to offset new costs combined with the challenges of placing new tenants at a higher price points, we could easily see that number double. While rental assistance approvals decline, the results will be more displacement and fewer housing options for low-income residents. At the end of the day, it is not the owner's responsibility to create a financial safety net for tenants who cannot pay, but increasing operational costs for landlords and management companies inevitably results in higher rents, reduced housing availability, and greater instability for the very households that the city are trying to protect, along with myself. I just thank you for the consideration and hearing me talk.
No. And thank you for that, Mr. Thompson. I think throughout this process, the cost and burden to renters has been loud and clear, and is front of mind for me. And so thinking through that budget, how much this costs us, we're going through that with a fine tooth and comb. Right, we haven't done this before, and so it's really hypothetical. And so we're not at that phase just yet, as well as finalizing this. I will say to folks that even after that, there will be a process by which we review this and look at it before we get to what that true final price is. But I think that we've done some good research, but we're looking at it as well to make sure that the costs do align and that we are trying to minimize as much as the burden as possible on landlords. But we definitely hear you on that, and so appreciate your advocacy.
Sure, thank you.
Next is Mamadou Samuel Diouf. Hopefully, I think the more I say it, I'll get better at it. Christopher Jackson is next, and then Terry Summers.
Awesome. All right, good evening, council. And it's Mamadou Samuel Diouf. That's my name. So I'm a real estate agent and investor here in Columbus. I work with a lot of clients, from all walks of life. One of the biggest things that I've seen in other markets, so I work in Cleveland as well, where there already is those regulations, is the strain that it puts on small investors and everyday people that are trying to get into real estate. I'm working on a deal right now up in Cleveland where the owner bought the property a year ago he did not know the severity of how the city worked with the rental registration. He bought the property from another investor who sold it to him that didn't take good care of the property, and there was already a tenant in place. So he essentially bought someone else's problem, and now he was responsible for fixing that. Once he got into this situation, the city started coming after him for the property and making the repairs that he needed to do. But the way that they did that was very bureaucratic, and he has been in the core process for the last 8 months, figuring out what he needs to do, and has since just decided to sell. Even in the process of him selling, he needs the approval from the city, and that has already taken 4 months when someone could have already came in and bought the property and made it up to code so these tenants that are living there could have had a better quality of life. So that's one of my biggest concerns with this, that might happen in Columbus. Another thing is, for people who are in real estate 24 hours, 24/7, it's not going to be that big of a deal for them. It's just going to be another, obstacle of many. For people who haven't been able to get into real estate, who are trying to build wealth for themselves, or trying to build wealth for families, this might just be, another obstacle that just discourages them even further for getting into this industry and trying to produce wealth for their family. With that also being said, these costs, as they continue to increase, which I've seen in Cleveland, them continuing to get more and more expensive, rents will also rise, which will make it harder for tenants to pay their rents, and it'll just be harder for them to, eventually create wealth for themselves as well. They'll stuck they'll be stuck in the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. And that's not, what I'd want for, everyday people. I'd want everybody to have a chance to eventually get into the position where they can create wealth for themselves as well, and not for someone else. So I don't think the big corporations is going to affect them at all. And if 1% of the people are the reason that this is even becoming a thing, I think it's still something that needs to be addressed. But I just would think that making it more efficient and more directed towards the people who are responsible for this even being an issue would be a better matter to go. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Mamadou, for your testimony, and I think for that unique perspective, particularly of those that are trying to create wealth for themselves. We definitely don't want to create obstacles there. You mentioned Cleveland, and I think that has been a big reference point for us because they have been the longest probably standing one, I believe, in the state of Ohio. There's also a learning point from us, right? Why we're going through this process the way that we are is that this is not Cleveland.
For sure.
This is not Cincinnati. This is not Dayton. This is Columbus, and we are going to do things our way that works for us. And so I thank you for pointing that out. I'll clarify with that sale and what we have, the fact that you're talking about in Cleveland where he can't even sell it without city approval, that is not anywhere in our proposal. What that registry would do is when that person sells their property and they get ready to go transfer that registry, they would become immediately aware of what those orders are and be brought into compliance, right? This is not simply about trying to, I think, intervene in real estate and transactions. That is not what this is at all. Also, I will say, interesting that because you've been doing business up in Cleveland, right? Those fees are much higher than what we're talking about here. I think the inspections and a lot of things that they require are much more invasive than we are here. Talk to me about if there's any other things, or I guess what you see in the change ones that we should point out or be aware of that you have seen in Cleveland that aren't working, or other places that you may be operating.
Yeah, one of them just being the inspections and then what goes on after the inspection. So in Cleveland, I've just seen it kind of be a creep where they set up one standard and then they continue to add on to it. So for example, in certain municipalities of Cleveland, there's the point of sale inspection that's required that basically requires the unit to be inspected before it's sold. But with that inspection, certain items need to be taken care of for them to even sell the property. And a lot of these owners who are selling, maybe they're in, financial burdens to where they can't afford to make those repairs before they sell. But the person that's purchasing them now needs to assume those violations. And with that, they're assuming additional risk because it has to be done through the court of law. And with that, it's decreasing property values in some of those areas and making it a lot more challenging for repairs to be done. They also have to oversee, every single step of the process with those. So if it's just, a small item, they would usually take, 2 weeks to be done. I've seen it take, 1 to 2 months.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that call out. And like I said, we want to make sure that this is something that works for Columbus. So again, thank you for being here.
For sure.
And ask that you continue to engage with us as we continue to move forward.
Yeah. Well, thanks for letting me speak.
Absolutely. Next is Christopher Jackson, then again, Terry Summers, followed by Daryl Jacobs.
Do you guys need a higher lectern? This is for short people.
We'll pick you up.
Good evening, Councilmember Bankston. My name's Christopher Jackson. I serve as the Vice President of Operations for 601 West Companies, a New York-based company, but I'm a proud resident here in Columbus. I stand before you in strong opposition to the proposed Columbus rental registry. While I fully support safe, quality, and equitable housing across our city, this registry does not move us closer to that goal. Instead, it creates a new layer of bureaucracy that will burden responsible property owners, increase operating costs, and ultimately harm the very residents it's intended to protect. First, the registry adds another financial and administrative mandate at a time when Columbus is already facing a rising housing cost, inflation pressure, and labor shortage across the property management industry. Many of us are working hard every day to maintain properties, respond to residents' needs, and create stable communities. Additional fees and reporting requirements will not improve housing conditions. They will simply increase operational expenses that by necessity flow down to residents in form of higher rent. We cannot claim to support affordability while passing policies that directly undermine it. Second, this registry duplicates systems that already exist. Property owners are already required to comply with local code enforcement, state landlord and tenant laws, federal fair housing, and numerous layers of reporting. Columbus has multiple tools to address problem properties today. Instead of building another database, expand oversight of staff, we should strengthen the enforcement processes that we already have and focus resources on the minority of actors who are truly negligent, rather than penalizing the entire industry. Third, this registry does not address the root cause of housing instability. Poor property conditions are often linked to aging housing stock, lack of resources, and outdated infrastructure. If this goal is better housing, the solution is investment, not paperwork. What we need are collaborative programs that encourage reinvestment in older communities, support rehabilitation, expand inspections where necessary, and build partnerships with owners who are willing to improve their properties. A registry alone does not produce safer homes. Finally, we must consider the broader impact on Columbus's competitiveness. Our city is growing, and we must continue to attract developers, housing providers, and investors who will help meet that demand. Policies that create additional friction undermine that progress. A registry may seem simple on paper, but in practice, it is simple that it's just not going to work to help combat the difficult environments that we operate in. We got 2 more seconds.
Absolutely.
I urge you to reject this proposal and instead work with industry leaders, resident advocates, and community partners to design a smarter, targeted solution that truly uplifts housing quality without creating unnecessary burdens. Let us focus on collaboration, not complication. Let us invest in what works, not hinder the people doing the work. And let us continue to choose policy that protects residents without unintentionally pricing them out. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Jackson, for your advocacy and all the work you do in our community with all the many hats that you wear. I will say this, I think you brought up a point that has been very clear to us, and we are talking about that as a city as well, that this isn't just simply about a stick. It is also about how do we direct our investments. So when we talk about very limited resources that we have now from emergency rental assistance, right? Compliance with the registry would allow you as even the landlord to have access to those types of things. When we think about our bond dollars from a preservation standpoint, it's not simply about our homeowners, which is very critical when I think about our low-income homeowners and or those on a fixed income like seniors, but it is also housing providers to make sure that they have access to help with mitigating standards, right? So if there is major damages that are done to a property, let's talk about what we can come up with to make sure that that unit stays affordable and stays in operations. Because for us, any unit that's not in productive use is adding to our crisis. And so I think for us, we are having those active conversations now that, again, compliance with this registry would also allow you access to other incentives that we are working on. So I want to make sure that we continue to engage with you on that, but absolutely hear you on the compliance piece, and particularly the competitive piece. As the economic development chair, I take that serious. I don't want to necessarily jeopardize our economic competitiveness, but I also think about, again, our tenants and our residents as well, and making sure that we have that balance. So we hopefully will get to something that is balanced and that we can all necessarily live with. May not like, but something that we can all live with.
And I appreciate that. I think as some of the speakers before, like Homes for Family, we have, our company has worked to make sure that we do what we need to do with them. But compliance, I think when I hear compliance for landlords, compliance also starts back at the home base. Mm-hmm. Keep your house clean, do these different things. And code enforcement is not going to change that. I think that for us, we work real hard to make sure we do what we need to do. But when we are hearing all these check marks that have to be done, it's hard to want to do business. Yeah. And for us, we have 9 markets. I love the Columbus market the best, but to go back to my investors and say, hey, this is what's going on, they're already raising eyes.
Gotcha.
Thank you
Well,
so much.
thank you for that. I appreciate it. Next is Terry Summers, followed by Daryl Jacobs, and then Rosalind Mabe. Terry Summers? No Terry Summers, okay. Daryl Jacobs, come on up. And then Ms. Rosalind, followed then by Mr. Nathaniel Wilkins. Daryl, welcome to council.
Thank you, Councilman, and thank you, Director Messer and Director Jones, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Daryl Jacobs. I am the pop in that mom and pop landlord category. I have a handful of single-family homes. As it relates to the rental registry, I am registered with the county. As you've heard, they collect or have collected the data for landlords. I hope that the city can export that data into another portal and then go ahead and modify it to suit your needs. And I hope that you could do it free of charge, realizing, as many have said before, that any type of expenses is going to ultimately impact the rents. I also ask that when you put together the registry form, that you keep it to only things that are relevant to the cause. You know, I've heard people say, you know, let's ask about average rent. Well, that's not relevant to what we're saying the purpose is. So, and I've heard others talk about, well, it would be nice to gather this information. And I'm sure there are a lot of information that it would be nice to gather. But I think for the integrity of the program, we should stick to the things that are relevant, so we stay true to what we said the purpose of the registry is for. As it relates to enforcement, I want to share some thoughts about tenants. You know, we're all in this boat together. You have the city, you have landlords, and you have tenants. And we want everybody to be successful, be happy, and that's our common goal. And I've heard the word accountability used many, many times as it relates to landlords. I have not heard the word accountability used as it relates to tenants. Tenants are a crucial stakeholder. This process, this program, or no other program is going to work without the participation of the tenants. If a furnace in one of my properties go out tonight, my tenant is going to know it before I am. My tenant is going to notify me. If I don't take the appropriate action in a reasonable amount of time, I would expect my tenant to report that to code enforcement. That's the way the process should work. I rent to adults, and with that, I expect them to do certain things. That accountability goes both ways. They are accountable to me. I entrust them with my investment. If there's a fire, I expect them to call the fire department. If someone gets injured, I expect them to call the paramedics. If someone commits a crime, I expect them to call the police. And if there are unchecked, unresolved code violations, then I am fine with them calling code enforcement. And if that process works, then I don't think we should have additional inspections just as a workaround because the tenants aren't calling in or don't want to call in. And I am very sensitive to tenants and some of the reasons why they might hesitate to call. We've heard some of those today. But I would ask those folks, those organizations, some of whom have spoke today, that say they work with tenants, to work through that. Okay, what are the fears that you have? Because in order to get to where we want to get to long-term, we need those tenants to call in and report it. So if they have fears, let's work with them. Let's find out why. And if landlords retaliate, then let's deal with that. But to circumvent that call, first of all, I don't think it strengthens your legal position. Having those calls, having those complaints on record helps your legal position. Skirting around those calls is just going to create a bigger mess. Then tenants are going to no longer believe that it's their responsibility to make those calls. So I think we should look at that stakeholder, much like we look at the others, and let's just talk about a little bit about accountability. And again, I love my tenants. I'm a good landlord. I can say that, and more importantly, they will tell you that. And I know that because they've told me, and they refer their friends and family to me. I could fill this half of the room with current and past tenants, and they all will attest to what kind of a landlord I am. And the only reason I can't fill the other half is because my tenants stay with me so long, I haven't gone through that many tenants. I have tenants where I have not raised rent in 7 years, and I don't intend to. I don't want to. I could, but I don't. So I know we talk a lot about the landlords and the shortcomings of them, and there are some, but they're 1%, I heard someone say. There are a lot of good landlords, and I think sometimes we want to cast that wide net. I've heard a couple people talk about, let's just inspect all of the properties. That's not the way to go. You know, that reminds me of, and I can't think of a better example than this, so forgive me, is ICE. ICE round up a bunch of people in that category that look like immigrants, and then they say, okay, who is legal, who isn't? Who's documented, who isn't? That's not the way to do it, and I hope we don't go down that path. And lastly, please engage or include some small operators when you have your, study sessions or conversations. Commercial landlords are different. When they have expenses, it impacts their P&L. But when it comes to the mom and pop operators, it impacts their dinner table, and there's a difference. And I'll give you one example where that really came true with a lot of my investor friends. During COVID, there was an eviction moratorium, which made sense. We didn't want people on the street during that pandemic. But what that did for the mom and pop landlords is said to their tenants, you don't have to pay your rent. And where did that leave the mom and pop landlords? Now with the larger commercial companies, okay, it's going to hurt their P&L. But everybody, the employees, are going to go home and eat. But for the mom and pop organization, it's not the same. So I ask that you look at that and make sure we include it from a mom and pop point of view as well. And lastly, I am here to help. I'll be more than happy to sit down with anyone at any time to talk about this. I want us to find a solution. I love my tenants. I love tenants. I think people should be able to live in nice homes. So I'm all for it and anything that we can do to get there, but I want to do it in an efficient way. And thank you for your time.
No, and thank you for that, Mr. Jacobs. And I think some of your comments, particularly around our mom and pop or smaller housing providers, are some of the changes that you've seen that we've made. I know my office has engaged. We've had some smaller roundtable discussions with organizations like CORE, which are smaller organizations, not necessarily larger complexes, as well as just personal conversations that I've had with folks, some of my friends who text me. They're actual friends, like, what are you doing? And I've had conversations with them. So absolutely, I think everyone has to be engaged. And I think that you did hit a point. I want to be very, very clear for us. When we're talking about bad actors, that is on both sides. There are absolutely some tenants who are not good tenants. It is true. Now, that does not mean that that is a certain type of tenant. I want to be clear with folks. That doesn't mean just because you're on Section 8 that makes you a bad tenant. My mom is on Section 8. Her place is a place that they actually take people through the tour because it's so clean. My mom got OCD, so you can brush your teeth on the floor. That's how clean her place is, right? But there's also some folks that are market rate folks who are good paying, are just bad tenants, and that happens. And so that's part of the ecosystem. So I do want to make sure that we're not demonizing anyone. Absolutely, you're right. There is responsibility on both sides of the equation. And I think there's work to do there. And I think that we could be talking to some of our providers that work with folks to figure out how we have that larger conversation. This is just one piece of it. When we talk about accountability, it's the one side of it. But I think there's a larger conversation that we have to have about relationship with when you get into that lease agreement, right? That's a relationship that you have to have there, and we have to figure that out. So thank you for pointing that out as well. And thank you for being a good landlord in our community. Happy to reach out to you and have some offline conversations as well.
I'd love for you to do that.
Thank
you very much.
Next is Ms. Rosalind. And pronounce your last name for me, because I don't want to butcher it. No, when you get up, I can't hear you from here.
Bye.
Bye?
Bye.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay. Good evening, Councilman Bankston. As a housing provider in Columbus, I'd like to share some of the concerns that I have about this initiative. I think we can all agree that costs have gone through the roof. My real estate taxes have quadrupled in some cases. Insurance doubled, materials. I remember in a former hearing, you say that there is no affordable housing aisle in Lowe's or Home Depot. So that's a reality that we as housing providers are living with. Now, the part that really baffles me, if we are trying to increase affordability, how does adding to these expenses help with affordability? Because inevitably, that cost will be passed down to tenants. The other concern that I do have is just the general overburdening of landlords. When I look at the city's past initiatives, it seems like housing providers are, I hate to use a strong word, as demonized, but we're not painted in the best light. What I've heard here today, repeated over and over again, it's that 1%. And I think the effort needs to be concentrated on that 1%, not to demonize a whole community, because the vast majority of landlords, as we can all agree, are very responsible. And the vast majority, not just in Columbus, but in America, own just 1 or 2 properties to subsidize their income in retirement. And so, just as the prior speaker said, issues like COVID and the rental moratorium really burdened landlords. And some of those people, their lives are forever changed because of the legislation that was passed and effected against them. So I think we need to keep this in mind, that the majority of landlords are not millionaire, billionaire owners with bottomless pockets. We too are facing an affordability crisis, and that really needs to be kept in mind. If this initiative is passed as it is without really revising it, I think inevitably all it will lead to is what we did not want, and that is increased rents. And more than that, I think you can only push back a community so far before it mobilizes the very people who are the only people really providing housing, the majority of us who are the private owners. So I think we need to keep that in mind. I feel that we need smart, sustainable, and inclusive initiatives, just like my other investors, friends have said here tonight, is that the housing provider community needs to be heard. They need to be heard and included. I've heard a lot from the other side, and I sympathize with that. However, when we speak inclusivity, let's also include the views presented here, and I appreciate that this process accounts for that. And contrary to popular belief, we have the same goal: safe and affordable housing, because that's the only way we can stay in business. I'll finish by saying this. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you can go alone, and that would be the city passing initiatives that constantly punish housing providers. But if we want to create sustainable, long-term solutions, actual solutions, then I think we need to work together and not collectively punish just a small percentage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bai, and I think that's what this process is. We're trying to work with folks. And I just want to be clear. I think punish is a harsh word.
It is.
When
yes.
we're talking about if, in fact, everyone is up and up, again, $20 per unit, a max out, right? These are for larger ones. I get it. We could talk through and figure out the numbers piece of this. But to simply say that we're just opposed to anything is not us working together. That is one side wanting only one thing. So I would just say that if we want to work together, we're creating a table for folks to work together.
Absolutely. And I think the concern is not necessarily the $20. It starts at 20, and before long, like the other cities, it will keep increasing. And that cost would just be passed on to tenants. That's the concern, not the $20 in itself.
No, and I understand that. And I will not speak to other cities and what they do and what they fees. Mm-hmm. Our city attorney has been very, very clear with us. This can only be used for the operations of the registry. So this is not a money grab for us. This is not money just going into the general fund. So I just want to make sure I clarify that for you all. But I hear I hear those concerns for sure, because inflation is real. And so I get you. I hear you. So
Thank you for the opportunity.
absolutely. Next is Mr. Nathaniel Wilkins, followed by Joshua Fravel, sorry. And then finally is Dimitri Hatson-Fotinos.
First of all, I want to thank you for having me. I've been waiting on this a long time. Nathaniel George Wilkins, 1612, in the North Linden area. I want to talk about the bad actors here for a minute. And I want to give 3 criteria here. You know, for a while there, we are talking this, and this is long overdue. This is long overdue. What I want to propose is a hefty fine and jail time of 180 days in jail. For larger properties, rental property, 100 units or more, the fee needs to be more than $150 instead of $10. A unit that you have down here for $40 per unit, it needs to be about $80. The maximum would be about $25,000 instead of $1,000. This is the time to look at a new era in time. You know, we do all this big talk. Cleveland is kind of ahead of this. Now is the time. You know, like I said again, we want things to be moving kind of quickly. I know what you heard today. People don't like this idea. I think it's a great idea. And it's time to move in the right direction. People don't like change. Change is coming. That's what I said. Change is coming now. We all gonna have to agree to this. And some people might not like it back there, but it's too bad. Now it's the time to keep the city moving. Is because we have to realize and understand what we're doing for the city is a great thing. Now is the time to look at a registry form. You know, I don't know what that looks like. I don't have numbers in front of me, but now is the time. And like I said again, if people's not on board, I'm on board, because I'm moving in my community and find bad landlords and other entities, out-of-town investors. In closing, you talk about this 525 latitude. Yes, it has changed hands. People might not like it, but now is the time to move in the right direction. Nicholas Banks. I would say our gratitude, and I will stand right along with you to get this pull ahead. This fee is going to have to be more. I don't care. If people don't like it, like I said, it's too bad. I'm living in a community and find property that's not listed, names, telephone numbers on the Franklin County Auditor's website. I spent my time at the library 10 to 12 hours a day and looking at property after property. Who owns this? Where's this person at? I would say in closing, I don't know if Judy Spilak was here, but maybe she had retired, and we looked at one property, and we could not find that owner. Now is the time to get this done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins, for your continued advocacy. Mr. Wilkins is down here every Monday. I call him the 10th council member, so appreciate that. Next is Joshua Fravel, and then finally Dimitri Hatson-Fotinos. Oh, is Joshua not with us?
Good evening,
Okay.
Councilmember Bankston. I don't think Mr. Fravel's here. I don't see him.
No worries, thank you. Go ahead.
Appreciate it. My name is Dimitri Hatson-Fotinos. I'm an attorney at Willis Law Firm. Would all the people in the room I represent please stand up? I represent, and I'm here on behalf of Oakwood Management Company, Harbor Group, 5812 Investment Group, and many, many others, which are representative of about 25,000 units in the city. It seems to me from the testimony from Director Messer and from comments you've made, Council Member, that you believe that this will be targeted towards the 1% of non-compliant landlords while being a minimal burden on everyone else. Well, it's $20, right? Ultimately, I thought it would be a good idea here tonight to explain to you and to Director Messer and to the people behind me, and to educate you about what the burden is to the 99%. So I brought some statistics with me. And I'm going to use 5812 Investment Group as a case study. 5812 manages 6,600 units in the city and in the surrounding area, 5,000 of which are in the city limits. 5812 Investment Group is affordable under 60% of AMI standards, which would be eligible for a low-income housing tax credit, but it is a conventional apartment owner. So these are affordable units that are maintained. 5812 is here, and a gentleman named Kane Vandal, who's sitting behind me, who's the vice president of 5812, told me today that they have 77,173 maintenance requests every year. They fulfill 76,759 maintenance requests every year. That's 6,431 requests a month and 6,397 completed every single month. Ultimately, the burden of this legislation is not $20. The burden is that if we end up as a conditional registrant, so in a 5812 analysis, you have 6,300 people making maintenance requests. Maintenance requests presuppose that something is wrong in a unit, or why would you make one? So those maintenance requests, if given to 311 first, which happens plenty of times, go straight to a notice of violation. The city then has discretion to give a notice of violation or an order of violation. If that happens to 5812 10 times in a calendar year on its 5,000 units, it is now subject to 500 units being inspected every year.
Just to be clear, that is per property, and I think that you know that.
That's not what the proposal that was given to me said.
It is, you know that.
I'm not here to argue with you, council member, I'm really not.
Okay.
Ultimately, the biggest property in Franklin County that 5812 manages, to my memory, is 759 units. In those 759 units, there are almost 1,000 maintenance requests on a rotating basis. Ultimately, those maintenance requests can translate into orders very easily. So if you take 10 orders per property, the same situation exists. The risk to an operator who's invested so much money, hundreds of millions of dollars in this city, to make units that are good, the 99%, is that the city now has selective discretion to choose to make it a conditional registry. If the city did that, which of course the city would never do, but if the city did, the city would then come and inspect 10% of 759 units, which would be Cornerstone Crossing Apartments at Bryce Road. That's 76 units. First of all, the city doesn't have those resources. Second of all, the invasion of privacy to 76 tenants on that property would be astronomical. Third of all, and maybe most importantly, that is not the intention of what we're trying to accomplish as a team in engagement. Engagement would mean that we all sit down at a table and we figure out what's actually going on. So let me try to explain what's actually going on. What's actually going on is that there exists a registry that 60% of the landlords in this city use. The city of Columbus has not looked at that registry and correlated the code orders with the registrants, I don't think. And Director Messer can answer that question. But at the end of the day, if the people against whom code orders are registered, then the registry is ineffective. If the people against whom code orders are not registered, then we can target those people by not being registered. Either way, we do not need to have conditional inspections. We don't need a fee to target the 99%. And we certainly don't need a registry because, as I think you're aware, state law says that registering with the county is effective to register with the city. So you can't make someone register with Columbus that is already registered at the county level without a court order. Because 532304B of the Ohio Revised Code says that a municipality cannot force registration on somebody that's already registered with the county. Can't be done. So registry cannot be penalized. That $2 a day that Director Messer put up there can't happen unless they go to court and somehow figure out that Columbus is not preempted by 532304B. It can't be done. So we don't have an effect of the registry. We have the potential for conditional registration at Cornerstone to cause 76 tenants to have to get a warrant to inspect inside of their units. And we have a $20 per door fee that can only be used to effectuate a registry that is not required. I do have a solution for you, though. You said at the very beginning of your comments that you wanted solutions. So here are the solutions that I propose on behalf of my clients and on behalf of the landlords that are the 99% in the city of Columbus. Solution number one, we have a list that the city of Columbus already maintains of what it considers to be problematic rental properties in the city. That list is used to do a collaborative meeting with members of the city attorney's office and refuse and fire and trash and the police. I would expand that list. I would then take the county auditor's registry and I would correlate that with those that have orders, and that I would take that information and I would give it to the apartment association, who already has a cross-reference list of people that actually have management offices here. And then I would take all of that data and come back and try to engage in a meaningful way with the real data, trying to figure out if the people that we're trying to make register aren't the same people that are the people that are doing the violations. Because if that's true, the registry will be completely ineffective. And then everything, all this fight, all this disagreement, all of this legislation will not be effective. I have not seen the city, in my representation of most of the landlords in Columbus, sue for failure to give a receipt or for other things that were in the Housing for All legislation, some of which has been tossed by the environmental court. The way to enforce this registry provision would be to file a nuisance action or to file a civil action. If that would happen, the city would lose, because this is not rationally related to an interest that doesn't already exist. So we're trying to pass something that has no practical effect while potentially burdening 75 tenants at Cornerstone Crossing, while 5812 does 6,300 maintenance requests per month in the city of Columbus. Council member, I would offer this. I would be more than happy to take Director Messier and yourself on a tour of thousands of apartments in this city that do it right. And if we can all sit down together on that tour, I'll rent the bus. We can all go together and see how many people, I'll take Brad with us too, and they can come and see how many people are doing a quality job of providing affordable housing here in the city of Columbus. And this particular legislation will not impact the people that are not. It will just cost the people that are. And that's what we're trying to prevent. The city can pass a registry if it wants to. I don't think that that in and of itself is going to be so problematic. But fees and inspections will not result in anything but further issues between landlords and tenants. Costs that cannot be ascertained. It is not $20. It is the possibility of having 500 inspections on 5,000 units when it's at the city's selective discretion to do it. I've already been there with my clients. I've already seen the city overstep without giving proper notices to the right people in code issues. I've already seen code enforcement officers change hands on campus, where one person had a modus operandi between 2012 and 2015 to do this, and then the person retires and somebody else comes new, and there's a whole different set of rules. All of those things are discretionary at the administration. But when you codify it legislatively, you create a huge problem for landlords that are doing it right, because we have to think about the worst case scenario at that point. Well, the city's never going to do that. We can't commit to that. We can't rely on that. You know, Councilmember Bankston and Director Messer aren't going to be here forever. Once that legislation is on the books, it's going to stay. And to the point of someone who said it earlier, that fee's only going to increase. Steve Gladman's been in this business 40 years, and he's never heard of the city reducing a fee. The city's not going to reduce the fee. And ultimately, if more inspections have to occur because the city uses its discretion to make 10% of the 5812 units get inspected, there aren't enough resources in the entire section of code enforcement to do that. So we've got to go back to the drawing board. We've got to hold on to this for a second. We've got to get more information. Get the county registry. Figure out the correlation between code orders and the county registry. Sit down with the apartment association. Come out with me and drive around all those units. Take 6 months and go through this in a very meaningful and very thoughtful way. And then let's sit at the table and figure out if we can actually write a law that will have some impact for the citizens of the city of Columbus. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate you giving me a little bit of extra.
Thank you, Dimitri, and the offer still stands. Always happy to sit down with you. We've sat down with Mr. Glavin many times. The apartment association, the door is open to them as well. Again, that is what we've said from the beginning. Now, if that is the case, what I would ask for you and your association is to also tell the truth to the folks when you pass the information along. And so if we're going to have this conversation, let's do it in a true and open way. So again, I appreciate you being at the table. The door is always open, and I want to continue the dialogue. That is why we're taking this process the way that we are. There is no legislation. I've said that many, many times, but yet you've told your members that there's legislation. We've told you that we are working on the fees, but then you come up with these numbers. That is not the case. We want to work with you, but I am committed to that, and so I want you to be at the table. And my door is always open.
Would you mind if I responded to that?
Sure.
I would ask Director Messer, because I know Mr. Gladman has 4 of the numbers. We still haven't gotten any. So one of the difficulties that we have right now is that we don't have numbers exactly about what's being quantified. And I know Steve Gladman has asked for those numbers. I'll ask right now. I would like to see every code order for the 1%. I would like to see that, and I would like to be able myself to correlate it with the auditor's office, because I think that's a big component of the disagreement, right? If you're going to be at the table, then we all need to be looking at the same data because there is a disagreement. And ultimately, if code wants to provide all the people that they've given orders to, whether that's a public records request or otherwise, and we want to look at the auditor's data to see who's registered and who's getting the code orders, then we'll be able to see what the practical effect is of what you're proposing. Until we do that, I agree that there's not legislation right now, but these proposals that are in this executive summary are troubling, because what they potentially mean is that warrants are issued for 76 people that live on Bryce Road for potentially code violations that we don't even know about. That seems pretty rough.
So do the folks on Bryce Road have 5 code orders every single year?
No, but they have 759 units, and in those 759 units, any code order can be issued at any time without their knowledge. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. That's what I want to have a dialogue about. When you call 311, and 311 has a code officer come out, and a code officer issues an order, sometimes, in 5812's case specifically, they'll issue that order and send it to some address in Minnesota, even though 5812 has a corporate office on Goodale and also has a management office at Cornerstone. They won't even give it to Cornerstone. Other times they do. I'm not saying that they do it all the time. It's just random. Sometimes it happens one way, sometimes it happens another. Sometimes I've seen transitions between one code officer and another. Sometimes people have different territories. There's some inconsistency there. So it is very possible, and I've been doing this 21 years and I've seen it not a million, but 100 times at least, where there's a code order that goes to somewhere and doesn't actually get to the rental office, and all of a sudden an order is issued, not a violation notice, an order, and the landlord never even had notice in the first place. I would like to know from Director Messer how many times that happens, because I know it does.
And that's, well, we're trying to help you out here, because if we had the actual contact information in our registry, we would send it to the right person. So thank you again. Look forward to engaging with you.
Thank you.
With that, again, want to thank everyone for their public comments and engaging with us. Again, this is one step in the process, and we continue, our door continues to be open. We continue to have conversations with whoever wants to have conversations with us. So again, thank you to those that showed up today to voice support, also those that decided to voice concerns, questions, and more. Prior to the closing, I would also like to make a few things clear. A rental registry is not a new concept. Many cities throughout Ohio have established them despite having access to a county registry in their area. Clearly, the county registries statewide, which are a product of state code, are lacking across the board. Hence why municipalities have opted to create their own. I believe that we are on solid legal standing here in creating it because they exist in other places. I am well aware that housing providers in this city are business owners. I have said that time and time again. As the chair of small business, I see that clearly. And as inflation and property taxes rise, so does the cost of doing business. But that said, providing housing is not just any business. It is not simply a commodity. It is a relationship in which you are providing a basic need to human beings in our community. So it is only natural that the city ensures that the quality of that is being provided is best as it can be. I am committed to continuing to listen to both sides on this issue so that the final proposal is the best it can be for Columbus. This is not about copy and paste. And I know that is concerning on folks that are proponents of this as well as those that are opposed to it. But we want to make sure that we get this right for the city. Now, I will say I'm also committed that making sure that in that legislation that we have a review and look back period, that every 3 years, 2 years, whatever the cadence is, that we are evaluating it to make sure that it is continuing to work. Because what may work today may not work in the future, and we want to make sure that we get it right ongoing. I'm also committed to working with the administration to develop ways to support property owners in keeping their units affordable, whether that be through preservation and repair dollars or via incentives or emergency rental assistance. That said, what I ask of my housing providers is to meet me halfway. Our current system is simply not working, and renters are being left behind every day in this city. If the mechanisms of the registry as currently proposed are an issue for you, work with us to improve them. This is not a question of if we will do this or not. It is a question of how we will do this, and I hope that we can do it together. And to our housing advocates, no policy is perfect from the start, and compromise is part of the policymaking process. As I always say, that we wanted to throw something out there that was very, very strong. That is going to evolve and change. And so I hope that you all stick in the process with us as well. As a legislator, I need to strike a balance between what is strong in theory and what is effective in practice. And engagement with those who may oppose this from the start is how we get there. All the feedback shared tonight will be taken into consideration as we continue to make edits to the proposal. And I hope that folks see that we are taking that seriously, from the first proposal to this one. Again, we are not trying to ram something down folks' throats. We are trying to work with folks. There have been substantive changes made, changes that, quite frankly, I didn't even want to see made, but I understand from the feedback that I've gotten that that is how we make policy. And so I would say continue to engage with us. We are saying that, and we are being authentic about it. My office is open, and let's continue the dialogue. I have asked my team to plan for a third hearing on this topic near the top of next year, which will go over any revisions made to the proposal or any draft legislation language that may come about. This has already passed my very aggressive timeline because we have announced this well over 2 years ago. So when we talk about taking our time to get to this point, it was a lot of work with our city attorney's office, a lot of work with our Department of Building and Zoning Services, a lot of work with our Department of Development, a lot of work with advocates and opponents that got us to this point. Over 2 years. And now I'm not going to meet my deadline, and I'm going to tell folks bread right now, I ain't going to meet the deadline. But we are not giving up. We're going to make sure that we get it right, not just simply move at speed. And so I will ask you to continue on that journey for us because that is what we're striking to do. So please be on the lookout for the date and time for the next hearing. And in the meantime, I look forward to the ongoing conversations. And thank you again, truly thank you again for everyone for the dialogue today, even the spirited dialogue. Me and Dimitri, at some point, we're probably gonna have a bourbon after this at some point when it's all said and done. But I appreciate all of you all, and we'll call this hearing to a close. And I probably won't see many of you all before then, so happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Good night.